welcome. Enjoy your meal.
Thank you.
How are you?
Good, I'm fine. How are you?
Well, have you been in Somalia?
No.
No. You look familiar.
Okay. Ray and I'm old.
Oh, yeah.
The trade union is from the government of Somalia.
Oh, good. Yes. Yeah, I've been in contact with someone who told me yes, and you're from the government. Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah, we are about to start. This is just a brief summary from several European Union countries, what they do on participation.
Very effective on social dialogue, which the government, trade unions, employers are promoting just transition.
That's great. That's great. So we will ask you also to tell, because that's what we're here for. Yeah. Great. Komen jullie ook toevallig of niet? Want we gaan beginnen. Ja. Hallo. Doet hij het? Oh, maar ja. Je moet de koptelefoon opzetten, anders hoor je het niet. Ja?
Ja, ga zitten. Front row.
Ja. Only for very important persons.
Yeah, oh boy, that's why we're not sitting front. Okay, well.
We gaan beginnen, Ferdi. Ja, dank je. I think everybody should put up the headset if you want to hear us better.
Karaoke.
Does it work? Yes? Great. I'm going to take a picture of you. You look like the Muppets girls. Okay. Let's start. There are some more people coming, but they are just going to the toilet. So anyway, thank you all for being here for our side event called Exchanging Approaches to Societal Engagement Within the Climate Transition. I think we all acknowledge how important it is that we have societal engagement if you really want to be successful in this huge thing that we call the climate transition. So the aim of today really is to listen to our speakers and to learn from each other, from best practices. Are you okay, Maria? Okay, great. So really the aim is that we learn, the guys from Somalia, great that you're here, and from Bangladesh, and Judith from Spain. So please, when we've got this plenary session, we will also would like to hear from you. Let me take you brief through the program. We are now in the welcoming part. We've got 3 great speakers, which I will introduce shortly. Maria from Colombia, Albert from Curaçao, and Mr. Rescanyu from South Africa. And afterwards, Kiki and Sarah, who are sitting over there, will guide us through the plenary section. They are our United Nations youth representatives on sustainable development. So good you're here, and we'll round up with the deliverables and how to move on. So this is us. My name is Arnoud Verzel, not Jan, which is stated here, but I'm Arnoud. This is my passport name. I'm a policymaker, and my specialty is campaigning, which I will talk about a little bit just later on. And Miss Maria Cristina Cifuentes, just back from the COP16, I think it was, on biodiversity, which was a great success because it made headlines in Holland, so that's good, I think. Dr. Albert Martis, he's from Curaçao. Very happy to have you here. You will tell us all about the Curaçao climate plan. And Mr. Rescanyu, very happy to have you here as well from Indelo Inclusive, what you are doing for getting a green economy in South Africa. So let's focus on the 5 Dutch components, the focus areas for our vision on societal engagement. I will talk you through this very briefly, and you can ask me later after the session if you want to. We've got 5 pillars, so to say. The first one is civilian participation. We think it's very important to make civilians feel part of being being part of this transition. We've got several ingredients to do that. Like we do things on societal initiative. We've got this National Assembly in which we like to and going to ask the public to participate in making policies. We've got climate justice, which means in Holland something a bit different than a just transition, which Verdi is an expert on international just transition. But climate justice in the Netherlands means that the higher of your emissions, the more you have to pay. And if you're a civilian, you don't have a lot of money, you do need to be able to participate. So that's what we are looking after for. Sustainable behavior is very important, so we work together with scientists and try to find out how we can make people show the right behavior, the right sustainable behavior, that it feels normal for them. We can't say you have to do this, they have to feel it for themselves. That's what we work on. Communication and campaigning, that's my thing. I'll tell you short about that. And identifying developments in society, that's very important and also pretty successful, I have to say. We've instituted a new institution which is called the National Climate Platform. They do a lot of research into society, and they do a lot of research on how to reach a lot of people in society. And they report on us and they advise us, okay, you have to do this, you have to focus on that group of society. And that helps us a lot. So, then I will say the 7 principles that we have determined on good engagement regarding to participation. If you want to have good civilian participation, you need to initiate it very early in the process. Please do ensure inclusivity to prevent over-representation. I mean, in the Netherlands there's a group of people who really are very active, but there's a larger group who is not active, and we also try to get everybody involved. Like our youth people, they are really trying to focus on getting the youth in as well, because that's what we're doing for the next generation. Please do secure political support, which of course can be difficult. Depends on the political structure of your country, but also get it from local governments, from regional governments. So we work together with them as well. Maintain transparency throughout. Well, of course, show what you do, important. Communicate actively before, during and after the process. That's what we do. We keep on evaluating and innovating, and that's what we are all doing, I suppose, because we know where the finish is, but how to get to the finish, that's part 2. We just don't know yet. This is a unique traject, this whole thing. And secure local ownership. That's what our energy guys are very positive on. They have created now more than 700 coordinated projects with people in it who use their own renewable energy. We're very proud of that. So there's all over the country people who possess their own bronnen, our own economy, energy project. Now, you understand what I mean? I'm sorry for my bad English. Okay. The final sheet for us before we go to our speakers. This is about campaigning, and what I'm trying to say to this is what we started in 2019. Is the first national climate campaign, because we think it's important to address to the people what to do, what to expect. It was called, translated, Everybody Does Something. Iedereen doet wat. It was partly successful because we included perspective of action, telling you, the people, what to do. But we also had a lot of lessons learned from that campaign. It wasn't concrete enough. Like, okay, this is it. I use less energy or take a shorter shower. That's all to solve this problem. That was not good in it. Second, we talked only to the people, not to the government, not to companies. That was the second criticizing point. The third one, what's going on? That this campaign didn't tell the story, what is going on? What is climate change? What are we fighting for? What are the results of what our actions are? So it lacked that. And the fourth one, it's a bit funny one, but everybody does something, so okay, I'm done, I'm ready, so you're next, or you're next, so I'm done with this. And that's not what we wanted to say. So we changed it in 2023 to make the switch. We've got 3 target groups. the general public, the companies with the most emissions, of course, and also the government. In the Netherlands, it goes like, hey, government, you tell us what to do. No, you go first. Otherwise, we won't listen. That's a bit of our culture. So what we're really trying to do is give the good example with how we act and with our building, with our energy, with our mobility. And in 2025, we will add to our national campaign the fact, what have we got achieved so far? Because it sounds like a big thing, this whole transition thing, and it is a big thing. You can get scared of it, but if you take a point, let's say 10 years back in time, and see what we've achieved in those 10 years, then it's a lot. The world is changing while we're talking about it. And we find out that it is good to talk about that to the people. Hey, look, we've already achieved this, go on. And what will happen next, because we're still not there. That's also an important message. We need to go on. Okay. Oh yeah, this is the final one. This is about happening now. We start our first citizens assembly. 70,000 citizens will be invited, which will happen in November, so this month, and it will happen next year, early next year, and that's really exciting. It will be a big thing in the Netherlands. This thing. Several other European countries have already had a citizens assembly, so we're looking forward to that. So that's the end of what I had to say. We go now to our guests, and I would like to give the stage to Maria. And I'm really happy to listen to you and your example of societal engagement.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and it's a great pleasure to be here. So there is a lot to tell you about our experience right now or in the last years in the country and with the current government and the way we are trying to enhance the participation approach and the whole of society approach regarding the different characteristics and conditions of the territories in Colombia. So in the first stage, I am working at the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development of Colombia. And I'm also a member of the peace team of the Minister of Environment, where I am representing the environmental sector in the peace dialogues with the Revolutionary Armed Forces. We have had a conflict of more than 60 years, an internal conflict that has been one of the main obstacles that we have had in the country for promoting development and reducing the gaps, the poverty gaps that we have. So even if we create a very good design or strategies for promoting the climate action agenda, we are going to face those obstacles of the presence of these revolutionary armed forces there and the level of conflict that we have that is going to avoid the implementation or it's going to be an obstacle for having an effective implementation. So that's why we are trying to promote a transformative approach as main strategy for the peace dialogues. And transformative approach means not only to invite the stakeholders to participate in the dialogues, but also to try to identify the main gaps and priorities and needs that we have at the territorial level for the poverty reduction and in terms of transportation, housing, and some other sectors that are issues and necessities that we have and we have identified from the indigenous communities, rural communities, and different stakeholders. So mainly what the leaders of the armed forces have announced before is that they won't stop conflict until we get real solutions for the real problems that we have at local level. And that's the main question they do always. Every time we try to get an agreement, that's the first question on the table. And it's, okay, you are asking us to stop fighting. You are asking us to stop being involved with conflict. But what are you trying to promote as government to reduce these gaps of poverty in this area of the country? So that's the main question. And even if we are trying hard to interconnect the different sectors and ministries of the government in order to give and provide projects, holistic projects and systemic solutions for the territories, there is still a big gap that we need to continue pushing and trying to strengthen the implementation of the strategies and initiatives at the local level. So for this, that's why we are talking about the importance of finance, getting a finance and international cooperation support in order to get more strategies and capacity building and technology transfer, those issues that we are even actually raising here in the negotiations at the convention are completely necessary at local level. Otherwise, we will have no way to implement real strategies to avoid these kind of obstacles. So that's on the first hand. Second, for the updating process of our NDC in the country. I think that's a great opportunity that we have had in order to invite everybody to be all the different stakeholders to be part of a policy framework that is going to work for the next 5 years in the country. And nowadays, all the parties are invited to update their NDCs for the next round of NDCs 3.0. It should be for 2025 until 2030. So we are trying to promote ambitious, and that's very good, a very good purpose. But for doing that, we are developing a methodology for the subnational workshops in order to invite the different stakeholders to think about the transformative approach as well. So every time we are formulating a new measure for the NDC 3.0, or if we want to update it, including a cross-cutting approach, we are asking them what is the final impact of this measure. Because more than having a high level of ambition for the climate action, we need to think what is going to be the impact, who is going to be, who are going to, which stakeholders are going to get the benefits from our measures implementation. And in that way, we need to identify the real needs from the different groups and know and have it clear that all of them have different priorities as well. So for approaching the methodology, we started inviting the different stakeholders for the first workshops. And then we saw that we had to separate the methodology and have specific workshops and scenarios with indigenous communities, other scenarios with Afro-descendant communities, other scenarios with rural communities, and so on. So we are trying to focus in that way the participation of different leaders, not only representatives at national level, because at local level they don't feel represented by the national leaders of the indigenous communities, for example. So local communities have said they do not represent us, invite us to the table because we have different priorities in this municipality rather than the other one. So that's why it's important to try to cover the whole territory. Of course, we need also to think about what are the enabling conditions to provide this kind of scenarios. So financial support is also important to give it to the communities in order to arrive to the place where they are going to participate in the workshop. Otherwise, we won't have any participation. And on the second hand, for the subnational workshops, we are inviting mayors, governors, and also private sector in order to think together what are going to be the special approaches that we want to promote in the new measures. So we have subtables, a table for energy, a table for transportation, and a table for energy transition, and so on. We are separating it by dimensions in order to start thinking what is the line basis for the formulation of the new measures, and how we are going to include the cross-cutting approach, because that's important too. And for the cross-cutting approach, we have developed a methodology on the peace perspective, including some elements of the positive peace index, human security index, and peace-building indicators. And we have identified 5 main lines, strategic lines for this methodology to approach the cross-cutting issues into the new NDC, and being sure that the inclusion of everybody is going to have a final goal that could have a holistic or systemic impact on the community's transformations and lives of their livelihoods and socioeconomic conditions and so on. So the first line, strategic line, is governance and transparency, and that means not only to invite them but also to make them part of decision-making process, which is very important, because at the end it's not to have a checklist or indigenous communities, they are here, children are here, youth are here, but at the end they want to have substantial results and in the text, and also commitment, and the way that the sectors are going to implement their measures is important. So that's why one of the main questions we do every time a sector says we want to formulate a new measure for the NDC. The main question is, do you have the financial support for doing that? Because you are not going to be committed to something that you are not going to fulfill. Otherwise, let's see together what tools do we have, or if you don't have maybe the contacts or the idea about how to get the financial support, the government, the Minister of Environment is trying to help in order to get the financial support from some sectors, or asking the private sector also to engage. So that's the way we are trying to integrate this cross-cutting approach for the first line. The second is related to the human rights approach, which also guarantees the participation and decision-making processes, and empowerment. So for empowerment, we need capacity building. And every time we try to talk about capacity building, we do not need to focus only in the capacity building strategy itself, but also in the gaps or obstacles that the communities could have for accessing to these strategies. So for example, if we have a community that live in a rural area, and we want to do a reskilling process with them and include them, we need to think what are the obstacles to make a very good participatory approach with them. Do they have access to transportation? Do they have gender gaps that maybe avoid the participation, for example, of women in the reskilling processes? Do they have poverty issues and food and security issues that avoid also to participate or are going to be an obstacle? So that's why it's important not only to focus in the reskilling process, but also to see all the gaps and try to provide all the enabling conditions to have a successful implementation of the strategies. We have a third one, which is related to positive peace from development of society, and resilience, which is also a priority in the Just Transition agenda. And we have another one about cohesion for promoting the capacity building of the different stakeholders. This is more specific and has some minimum criteria and technical suggestions in order to promote this kind of strategies. And on the third hand, we have the Just Transition agenda that is trying to promote this special principle of no leaving someone behind. So we have indigenous communities, Afro-descendants, as I said, that have totally different priorities in their territories, and actually they have also some conflicts among, we can identify some conflicts among communities because of land use, access to natural resources, and so on. So that's why it's important to hear what are the priorities of each group and try not to avoid the possibility of meeting with some of them, because sometimes government think they are problematic, but that is not the idea. The idea is not to think they are problematic, so we are not going to invite them. We are going to avoid it, or just pretend that we don't see the reality when we are facing this. And if we don't focus our efforts in trying to give current solutions to their current problems, we are not going to have any change or transformation in short term or long term. So it's important to consider, as I said, the different methodologies for identifying the response measures of Just Transition policies, the positive and negative impact, because it has an impact. In Colombia, 20% of our economy depends still on fossil fuels, but for the government of Colombia, it's a priority to promote the phase out, but with a progressive transition away from fossil fuels. Nevertheless, we have to do this with time, middle and long term, and try to identify what are going to be the alternatives for economic diversification every time we promote a Just Transition policy or strategy at national level in order to guarantee the human rights approach and think about the effect it could have in internally displaced people, in children, and local communities too.
Thank you very much, Maria. Very inspiring, very good. It seems like a big task doing this like in a huge country like Colombia. So really, but you're on a good way. Thank you very much. So now I would love to give the mic to Mr. Albert Martis from Curaçao and his story. And I'll ask the lady in the back from the technique to start. Oh, there it is. Great.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, good afternoon. I would like to thank the organizers to give me some minutes to talk about the different measures and also approach we had in Curacao. I'm the chair also from the Curacao Climate Change Platform, and I will go and tell you about the roadmap. So where is Curacao? Way there you will find we are in the center part of the Americas. That's in the Caribbean and the islands. You can see we are known for our beaches, but also for good fish in Curacao. So that's why you see that picture. So that is actually where we are, but still on the island we have to discuss also climate change, because our beaches we have to deal with the consequences of climate change. So we started our endeavor by looking at a document, making a survey to find out what is actually living on the islands regarding climate change to the people, to everyone. So this is the document. It's a kind of policy assessment how to deal with climate change. And the recommendation coming out of it was actually we have to develop a mechanism where we're going to gather everyone together in order to have those national mitigation plans and adaptation plan that was mentioning already in the Agreement of Paris. So how are we going to deal with that? So we'll discuss a lot about it, but then we start thinking of there will be three approaches or three governance approach how we're going to deal with on the island. The first one is actually looking what already is available at international level. You see, here we see that we start discussing what are the stakeholders at the international level. You have the WMO, UNDP, and other UN agencies. They start discussing how we're going to approach climate change. And that was in 1988. So it was the beginning of, first, we have to separate research and scenarios, and we call it actually the IPCC. IPCC only deals with research and scenarios. The policies, also we have to tell you that they won a Nobel Prize at that time, and I also was one of the editor of those volumes at the time, together with a lot of other experts. So then when you finish the research scenarios, there you will start talking about the policies and the laws. And what we will see right now is, this is what we're discussing here at the COP. We're discussing, okay, these are the results of the IPCC, how we're going to discuss the policies related to it. So that is actually at international level. And so that was actually COP21 in Paris with the Agreement of Paris. So the same thing we said, okay, let's do it in Curacao. But who are the stakeholders in Curacao? As I already mentioned with my previous speaker, you have to find a way how to involve everyone. So we start talking about the public sector. That is a very important sector, the private sector, the academia, and the NGOs. Because the NGOs always will be telling the public sector that they're not doing the right thing and so on. And as you mentioned correctly, put them already in the first meetings together, and that is where you can start working on it. So in Curacao we decided that, and so that was actually the establishment of the platform, and then we will continue with the Curacao COP. So that is at national level. We also will start having a effort to combine everyone to discuss the policies and prepare the laws for the different departments of the government. So that is our approach. The platform actually will discuss scenarios and research. Then we will move it to the policies to another group. Another thing is actually in 2016, the UN start reforming all the different bodies of United Nations. So there was something that they start thinking of is we have to go to the result-based management system. What is a result-based management system? Right now, everyone knows project management. That's great. You're only going to look at your success of the output. But result-based management goes further. It also looks at the impact of your program. So right now we're talking about impact of climate change on the society, but you have to also think about when you're going to talk about climate change, the process, your system has to have an impact on the communities. It's not that you're going to use millions of dollars and there's no impact on the communities. So that's why you have to make your system also result-based management. Another thing is what we saw in Curacao. A lot of companies, a lot of good ideas from the NGOs, a lot of those stakeholders, but they are not aligned. They're doing a lot of things, but not aligned. So what is the consequence of that? So at national level, you will find that we're doing a lot of good things, but we don't make progress. So you have to come with a kind of a new idea. So you have to have a strong national goal. And that is where you will ask everyone to develop together a national goal. And that's then when you go to develop a national goal together, the result will be everyone will be aligned, so you will make progress. So we did that also in Curacao. So alignment of all stakeholders' objectives. So this is a beach in Curacao again. So what is actually the goal for Curacao? Our national goal is that Curacao will be a resilient society with abundant biodiversity and a key player in renewable energy. So that is everyone. We had I think 5 or 6 visions, and then we reduced it till one vision where everyone was happy with that vision. So the vision is there, and we have to find a way how to develop our strategies to complete the vision. The first thing is impact studies. There's a lot of good literature about sea level rise for Europe, sea level rise for general islands, sea level rise for wherever you want, but not specific to the island. So that's why impact studies will go directly what will be the impact for the island itself, not general studies. You have to find a way how to bring it to the island. Temperature increase, also the same thing, try to figure out. So the first pillar is the study of the impact for the island itself. Then you will start discussing the mitigation efforts. For us, as a small island, mitigation of CO2 is not a great deal, but still you can think about how you're going to make your island more energy efficient. And that is also by thinking of energy transition. And there is very important that we are doing that right now on the island. Third pillar is adaptation. There is where we have to invest a lot of energy and also funds where we'll be able to adapt all the different, like the infrastructure, the we call it also the health sector, because temperature increase will be a problem for the island. What is important, the last one, is the capacity development, because you will be able to do everything, but if you don't have youth engagement, like we have today, you will lose everything in 4 or 5 years from now. So you have to have the youth engagement from the start. So that is actually important there. So here again, I have the text, but I will not go through the text, but here you will find how in detail we start talking about the long-term outcomes of our objectives. So this is actually part of the result-based management. You have to find a way together with all the stakeholders to come up with this type of documents. And here you will find again, it is important to fortify your organizations that are involved. Also, the policymakers of the government should know about climate change. Sometimes we're doing a lot of things in our government, but also in the the private sector. But the people, the key people, the policy makers of the government, they are not aware. So it's good that you have be able to train them in climate change. So what our focus area, you will see there, sea level rise, heat, and so on, biological system also, and human system. That is important to work on it. Mitigation is renewable energy, transportation and waste management, and adaptation is also important to look to the 7 points. One thing I would like to highlight here is actually these are the priorities that, again, together with all the stakeholders, we have addressed them. At the start, again, we had about 50 priorities. And then we said, no, we cannot have 50 priorities in the coming 5 years. We have to reduce them to at least 10. But then again, when you talk to everyone, you still have to give them, okay, here is one, we'll take that as a priority. Otherwise, you will not be able to finish your priority. So that's why we just said, okay, we have about 16 priorities. Let's work them out for the 5 years, and then the next 5 years we will make a choice for another set of priorities. So this is actually those focus area with the 2 parts of our vision. You see resilient society and abundant biodiversity, you see food security, green infrastructure, and so on. A key player in green energy is green energy, waste management, and green transportation. Those are the things we're working on the island. And together, right now, everyone, they are aware that this will be the priorities. They will not come during a meeting with other priorities because it is not allowed. So the programs, what we have here is actually, as I already mentioned, that it is important to maximize all the different studies that are available worldwide and trying to make them tailored to the island needs. And so that is what we have been doing. And for now, every year we have an annual meeting regarding how far are we right now and what will be the next step for next year. So every stakeholders that come to the meeting will get a homework for next year. And that's the way we're working together. So actually, this is actually the part that is important. We have finished our planning. And one of the founders of the US was saying, if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. And that is what we have done. And now we are in the stage of implementing and monitor. Monitoring is very important. You can see it also here at the COP. We have to monitor our ambitions. So that is important to monitor also how far you come. With that, I think this is my last slides. It's not something that I've done it by alone, but I had a team of different ministries, and one of them is here, Vanessa Torre from the economic sector. And so Masha danki we say in Papiamento. Thank you, and that is a nice view of Curacao. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Albert, for sharing your views on the Curacao climate change platform. It's really interesting to see what you're planning. Actually, Benjamin Franklin should have gone to Curacao, shouldn't he? Okay, let's switch to our next guest, which is Mr. Rest Kanju from South Africa. Very pleased that you're here. I will ask the lady from the back. There we are, from Indelo Inclusive.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure. Oh, great. Thank you. I'm not sure if I'm audible enough. I can't hear myself, so that's perfect. Thank you very much. So yes, my name is Rest Kanju. I'm from South Africa. I represent an organization called Indalo Inclusive. I'm very inspired by the first two speakers. I think the central message that we hear, at least from them, and I think what reverberates in the system for us is, I can best represent it by a question that one of my colleagues once asked me. Her name is Shamila, she's sitting there. When we started the project, which I'm about to present to you today, she asked me a very difficult question as the head of an organization, and she said, why are we doing this work? There's not a lot of money for us to be involved in this, and it's a very complex piece of work. And my answer to her was that it's got nothing to do with us, but it's about the people. As much as the transition is really focused on us as society moving to a low carbon economy or greener economy, at the center of it is that there's a lot of people who are affected by the situation. And I think we've got to recognize that and acknowledge it. The transition itself is not supposed to be a very complex process. But in our case, in South Africa, we're a very unique society, a very unique country. We have a Gini coefficient of 0.67, which makes us one of the most unequal societies in the world. So the gap between the rich and poor, it's actually quite real, and it's very big. And in fact, a majority of people in the country live in extremely marginalized environments and situations. In the area where we work, in Mpumalanga specifically, it has the highest concentration of coal mines, which basically power our coal-fired power stations. And what that means is it is also a source of a lot of cheap labor, unskilled labor, and a lot of populations. In fact, not just South Africans, a lot of countries in the neighboring states actually depend on those regions for employment. When we talk about inequality, the reality is that you also have a situation where the concept of a transition itself becomes quite complex to explain. So inequality also means that there is also a whole lot more people who are uneducated. So the stuff on the things that we think are quite easy to understand, it's actually not as easy as you think. So in our case, we actually had to go through and explain even the basics of what climate change is about. That sounds very strange in the country and in the state of the times where we live, that you still have to be explaining what climate change is about. It's even more complex when you talk of a transition. And in fact, and the key word in the transition is the word justice or just transition. How do you make it just? How is it just when you're going to be shedding a lot of jobs and you don't replace them with the same equal number of jobs or the same pay? So the issue of justice becomes quite difficult. However, we're a very unique country. We are 30 years young, or just over 30 years young in terms of our democracy. And I raise this point because I need to paint a picture that South Africa has actually undergone a transition before. And one of those most powerful transitions we've undergone was the change from apartheid to a participatory democracy. A change that supposedly did not shed blood. So I underline the word supposedly because that's not necessarily true. There was blood shed, but we actually went through our transition through a very, of course, rigorous negotiated process. And this transition is not different. In fact, we've just had our latest elections, again, where the ruling party actually lost the majority. And the reality is we are going through yet another form of transition. So transition is not supposed to be quite complicated. I'm here to present to you a case study of a community called the Paliseng. Don't worry about pronouncing the name. I think possibly if you are from the Netherlands, you will easily pronounce the word Grootvlei. Grootvlei is the Great Valley, right, in English. It houses one of our small power stations and affects quite a lot of people within that space. This case study, I must actually disclose to you quite immediately that it has become a model in the country for best practice in how societies should be engaged and how communities should be engaged in as far as the discussion or the discourse around the transition is concerned. Three particular things have happened as a result of this work that we did. And before I get deeper into it, one is that we've already started sharing the story of Grootvlei to at least 15 local municipalities in the country that are actually undergoing possibilities of coal-fired power stations being shut down. So we've already shared the story to those. Secondly, we have jointly published an article or a case study with the ILO ITC, the International Training Center in Turin. And we're happy to share that with you, and you can read up the story if you want to. And maybe lastly, and maybe particularly very important, we have been invited as Indalo Inclusive to assist the Komati Power Station, specifically a number of partners that are involved within that space, including the Presidential Climate Commission, to help them retrospectively re-engage communities in Komati. Komati is one of the biggest power stations that we've had, and it has already shut down, and a lot of jobs have been lost within that space. So when we talk of real tensions within communities, the South African society, for lack of a better word, gets triggered by a potential of a close of a coal-fired power station, because Komati has been a disaster. So a lot of jobs have been shed, a lot of jobs have been lost, and communities is up in arms. Now I need you to understand that if we say communities up in arms, it actually means that the political powers are not happy. Because if the communities are not happy, it just means that there are no votes going to the ruling party. It's as simple as that. But it also means that the economy of a specific area basically shuts down. And the result of that is what we sometimes refer to as ghost towns. So I'm sure you understand what a ghost town is, right? And I'm sure we all have legends of ghost towns in wherever we come from. So I'll run through these slides quite quickly, and please forgive me, I will not dwell on them. But a little bit about our organization. How do you run this again? Okay, great. So a little bit about our organization, Indalo Inclusive. We're a not-for-profit company, and our work revolves around supporting what we call eco and inclusive enterprises. And the way we work is that we have a very strong focus and leaning towards enterprises that have a green impact. But most importantly, we also want to see inclusion. So the issue of inclusivity within communities and in the work that we do actually plays a pivotal and a very central stage and space around that. That possibly gives you an idea of how our approach was. Where do I press? Okay. I won't dwell too much on the locations that we work, but we are a national organization that has 3 offices in South Africa, and we work with a number of partners. I don't know where I point with this, okay? I must just push it. Okay, great, okay. So, the little story and how it all started. We're very honored, and thank you very much to the Netherlands government, specifically the South African embassy, that invited us because they've signed a memorandum of understanding or a letter of intent with Eskom. Eskom is the power producer and power supplier in the country, to actually look at collaborating in this particular Grootvlei power station. And one of the key challenges and the key issues that emerged from day zero when they started this work was the recognition that they needed to understand, and there needs to be an understanding of how communities are going to be affected by a potential closure of the Grootvlei power station, and in fact, how would they want to respond in as far as the transition is concerned. So we're asked to actually go and assist in as far as working with the communities and understanding what they want to do. I won't dwell too much on this, but we need to understand that Grootvlei is a small local municipality within the Mpumalanga province. So Mpumalanga is a province that is the most eastern of all the provinces in South Africa. It borders Mozambique, but the area where we work is closer more to Johannesburg, and it's not a big community as such, but it actually becomes a very pivotal community because this community was already on the edge. This particular power station about 10, 12 years ago was mothballed, and the community actually felt the pain of a mothballing process of that power station. And we needed to actually now understand what it means to actually get involved in there. Why do we do this as an organization? Our work is anchored on two pillars. One is what we call ecosystem development policy and dialogue, because we believe, and my colleague from, I hope I can pronounce Albert, Dr. Albert, one of the things that he talked about is that when there's many role players within an environment, it becomes critical that those are coordinated. In our case, we believe that when ecosystem players are coordinated, you create a conducive environment through which entrepreneurship can thrive. Because we believe that our entry point is that we use market-based approaches to stimulate economic growth within communities and environments. So therefore, the second pillar is about enterprise development. And indeed, similar to what Dr. Matthews presented, in the Palisade, we needed to coordinate with a number of stakeholders. And the issues of transparency, as communicated, issues of good planning, actually had to play a critical role within that space. I won't dwell too much on these activities, but when we started the project, we worked with the Wageningen University in the Netherlands, together with the Dutch Embassy and a number of stakeholders to understand that the key turning point of our process was the following, and I hope you hear me and record this. On the day when we went to want to understand among the communities what the challenges were, the communities stopped us from doing work. So when I say stop, I actually mean physically stopping us, and the situation was almost volatile to a point where we either had to pack our bags and go. Now you've got to understand what that means, right, for the process of a transition, the process of closing of a power station, and in fact the process of the relationship between Eskom and the Netherlands Embassy. It means that everything else had to stop because the community said the following: you can't even start talking to us about a transition when we don't understand what climate change is. Now that's a very powerful statement to mention, because in the context of a transition, first talk to us about that, and then you must talk to us about the implications of a transition. So therefore we had to work with a number of stakeholders, and the embassy funded us to run such a process of education, empowerment, engagement, and we had to use our tools to look at participatory approaches and design thinking methodologies to actually engage the community. You need to also remember the following: the communities did not trust us. For a very long time, even though we are a non-state player, the communities didn't trust us. So we had to build trust among communities. So one of the key lessons we had to learn, above all things, is that trust and transparency is critical within that process. So what are some of the factors that we had to consider, just quickly, moving quite closely, into closing what my presentation is about? One of those things is, who is represented in the discussion? Who are the players? So if you talk about inclusion, there's certain things that you've got to look at, gender representation, issues of youth, women, and the likes. Are we creating a space for this dialogue to take place? And in fact, is it in an equal format? Is it in a language that is understood by people? And have we made provision for local stakeholders to participate in that? So now provision is not just inviting people, but it's also about recognizing that people are not equal within society. How do you make sure that everybody participates in a manner that is equal? But most importantly, if you are going to be educating people about climate change and the transition, people need to have a reference point. At Indalo, we believe that people can only innovate to the level of their exposure. So what does that mean? If you are not giving people examples of innovations, engagements, and processes that they can understand to their level, there's not much you can achieve. So you've got to sell the dream. You've got to tell these people, you need to give them hope. And with Fedi, we're discussing this hope issue, right? When people have hope and they can hold on to and they've got evidence, therefore they are able to trust your process. And it's always about the people and their livelihoods. So as much as we talk about the beautiful stuff of green and technologies that are quite innovative, turbine, wind turbine, power and all sorts of things, at the bottom of this whole thing, it's about basically the people. So again, job opportunities have become central to that process. I want to share one more thing, then I conclude. At the end of the process, communities had to then come to us and say, yes, we hear what the embassy wants to do, the Netherlands embassy wants to do. As we transition, we hear what the ESCOM power station wants to do, but we have our own ideas of things that we want. So before you go and do anything, can you consider our ideas first, right? The bad news is we have not been able to fully meet this. However, certain partners have come on board, like the Africa Climate Foundation. The Netherlands Embassy has committed to go again with us on a journey to support the following interventions that the communities themselves wanted us to support, that they've identified. Because they said, before we talk about the closure of the Grootvlei power station, before we talk about the agri-hub, before we talk about anything, consider the following. So these are examples of things that they want to do. Buyback centers, a tourism project, a maize milling plant, a water filtration facility, solar technology projects, and brick manufacturing from fly ash, that is a residue from the mine and from the coal power stations. The question is, can we fund this for them to happen on the ground, for communities to start having new jobs and new economic activities on the ground? And I'll stop there, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Rest, for your impressive story. I think now we've listened to three great speakers with three good stories, that there's this common thing that it is essential to go out, talk to the public and get to regional, even local communities and do it together with them. That's difficult, as you've all described, but yet again it also gives us a new way of talking to the public and talking to these regions. That's what we see in the Netherlands. There's a new way of existing now. From, hey, we talk to you about this. We get the point of views from that community, and we start discussing on another level. So that's maybe something, a good thing, what brings us in this whole climate transition discussion. But now I'd like also to hear from our guests, our visitors, and I'd like to invite Kiki and Sarah to the stage, if you can guide us through. Please.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me? I hear myself, so I think we're good.
And can you hear me also?
Yeah, test. Okay, good. So as we've been introduced, we are Sarah and Kiki. We are two of the youth representatives in the negotiation delegation of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And I think today we've been speaking a lot about going into the public and speaking to them and consulting them. And actually, in short, that is what we do. We each have a 2-year mandate. It's facilitated through National Youth Council and different ministries, where through an election process we are appointed by youth in our country. Everyone under 30 can vote for their new youth representatives. Mine was a year ago and Kiki's 2 years ago. And once you are appointed, you get a mandate to represent the voices of young people within the negotiations. What are those voices? Well, you need to go research that first. So what we do throughout the year is we go throughout the country. Thankfully, we have a small country, so we can take the train anywhere. We speak to young people in schools, different events, organizations, youth groups, to talk to them about climate change or other sustainability issues and to really get their perspectives on these issues. And we then bring those into policy. So, for example, that is one of the things we are doing here at COP today.
Yes, and of course we cannot only talk
societal engagement without showing the best practice. So we want to engage with you guys right now in the audience. We've heard so many great best practices on how to engage the whole society into climate policy, but we're really curious on how you guys as a person, or how does your country engage the whole of society into climate policy. Yeah, do you have best practices? I see a hand.
Yes, thanks a lot. I've listened to the panelists, and I wanted to share our experience in Somalia. What we have done in Somalia is, I come from the trade union side, and we have achieved a just transition in less than 2 years. And it's quite one of the experience that we have got is as trade unionists and as a government here, as well as employers, we were engaging what we call social dialogue at the federal level, because our country is federated. So we have a federal level and we have a state levels. And what we have engaged was how to make sure a just transition is realized in our country. Somalia has the longest coastal line in Africa. And when the climate-induced crisis is coming from Asia, developed countries in Asia, India, China, Japan, we take the first hit, because that is where the mainland Africa starts, and the climate-induced crises are very real. So in these 2 years, our National Trade Union Federation, of course working with the Dutch Trade Union Federation, FNV, we have campaigned aggressively to get a just transition becoming a reality. So we have organized forums, we have organized meetings, we have first tried to explain to our government what is just transition and why and how it's important. Then they came on board, the employers also came on board. So we first then engaged in a tripartite approach. Then later on, to bring the civil society on board, we have also adopted a tripartite plus. So that tripartite plus also brought everybody else on board. And now I can tell you that February this year, just transition has become law in Somalia. First country in Africa that has made a law in Africa. Thanks a lot. And for us, it is like, yes, it's possible, it can be done. If it's done in Somalia, it can be done any other country in Africa or any other country in the world. Because in as much as we know the climate change is a real issue, is that the way out is also just transition in an inclusive approach. Workers, their families, their communities, and everybody, should not be left out. So that is one thing that we have approached. Our approach was using social dialogue, both at the federal level and state level, because you cannot leave also the federal member states, the regions. So like what you were doing, Doctor, in the regions in Netherlands. So that's why, for us, we feel that the way we have achieved just transition to be in law, and now we are developing national policy on just transition, and NDC, the third phase is also coming up. So all these things happen because of the social dialogue that we have adopted, and the tripartite plus, not only the trade unionists, employers and government, but also other actors in the society. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much for that contribution. And actually, I was just thinking, because as a youth representative, I see a lot of fingers, which I think is good. We have a lot of speakers, so we'll try to keep it short. But as a youth representative, I'm quite tended to give the young people in the room the voice first. And I actually happened to meet a colleague from the trade union as well, 2 seats behind you. So I was wondering if there's anything you'd like to add.
Thank you, Sarah. And also, thank you, Omar, comrade. Yes, I'm very happy to hear that we're having these discussions. And as Omar was already saying, just transition is something that we have been fighting for in different countries. I myself come from the youth movement within the FNV, the Dutch trade union movement. And what I was just thinking was how we have been pushing and fighting for the inclusion of workers' rights, but then there's another side of it, which is also including trade unions at the start of these discussions on international level, on national level. to make sure that also the youth trade union voices, but just in general, these young voices are included at the start of these policy processes. So yeah, I was just listening to you, Omar, and thinking, okay, we're doing all this work, so now I want to see that this work is also centered within our policies, and that we see, okay, let's also include trade unions, young trade unionists. So yeah, those were the thoughts that came up in my mind.
Amazing, thank you. And I think this is a great example of how a discussion like this can only be the start of maybe further discussion. So I hope to see you guys talking afterwards, but I saw another finger in green in the back.
Yeah, hello, I come from the Just Transition Institute, which is part of the Ministry for Ecological Transition in Spain. First of all, let me thank you all the speakers, because a lot of the things are really, I would say, sort of reflecting and doing also at national level in Spain, the question of the differences in civil society and the importance of really actors on board that you were mentioning from Colombia, also from Curacao, the importance, I would say, of the impact assessment and really looking at also the region, at the difference at national level and within the regions. And then also the aspects of the workforce, I think they've been very important. If I may, very briefly, in Spain 6 years ago, we adopted what we call a strategic framework on energy and climate, and it has 4 pillars, 4 legs. And each one of these 4 legs, we involved civil society. We have a climate law, but then also an adaptation plan, also an integrated plan on energy and climate for very concrete measures from 2020 to 2030. And something which is very important for us, it was the adoption of a just transition strategy, because we think it's very important to operationalize just transition, and in the same way that we put, I would say, objectives for the environmental agenda, we need to do the same for the social one. And as part of the just transition strategy, we adopted what we call an urgent action plan, which came with an agreement for the closing of the mines in Spain and the 50 coal-fired power plants. So we understand actually participation as an onion, if I may call it like this, with different layers. And at the core of these layers, social dialogue is a fundamental one, and the agreement was made with the trade unions and the companies. And something, and I will finish here, that we find very important as well is we know these regions have been fundamental for the development of Spain on the energy, I would say, grid, but they need to be not only part of the past, but of the future. So the question of economic diversification that was mentioned in South Africa is very important for us. And for us, the key of success when it comes to just transition related to the workforce is ensuring that the same amount of jobs that have been destroyed are created. Of course, easy to say, difficult to do. There's also issues related, I would say, with a sense of belonging to a collective, that you need to work on that as well. But we think, I would say, that that's one of the important aspects. We are working uncharted territories, but it's clear that participation is fundamental to make sure, I would say, that we work together and there is a common, I would say, ownership on the process.
Amazing, thank you so much. I'm immediately wondering, because I've heard this multiple times today, we keep talking about replacing jobs. We need the equal amount of jobs, we need equal pay. But I'm wondering if there's anyone who could share best practice on how we can help people transition from those jobs. Is there anyone with experience on that? All right, something to think about. Anyone else who would like to add something to the discussion?
In the case of Colombia, that we have this conflict issue that I was mentioning before, we have to transit from the illicit activities to the illicit ones, and that has been one of the main challenges, because most of the communities are very much involved with illicit crops, for example. And we were balancing how much do they get as payment monthly, and it's like the triple of what we could provide in a normal or illicit activity. So what we are trying to promote as government is that the communities could start being involved more in restoration and conservation activities, agroforestry, and this kind of economic activities that has a sustainable development perspective, but it's even not enough. So it should be always accompanied with an awareness campaign. Campaign, and that means that we have to promote awareness in communities about the importance of taking care of the environment and stop doing what they are doing. Otherwise, they will always see the economic sector here not caring about anything else and being involved with this kind of illicit activities. And we are always going to have conflict. So that's a theory. What we can promote is a progress towards more peaceful society. But saying like the conflict is going to finish completely this year, no, this is not going to happen. So we have to deal with the conflict scenarios, promote progress, try to promote this kind of activities, but capacity building and awareness campaigns and strategies needs to be focused also, especially in children and youth, which are the future generations and new generations that we need to involved. We have some leaders of those armed forces that we are aware that they are just taking advantage of the time while we have dialogues with them. They will never change their mind about what they are doing. So they just say, yes, but let's start like step by step, But at the end, the hope is more focused in youth. That's why we have to invest more in youth and awareness for them.
Thank you so much. That also showcases how a feeling of belonging in the transition is really important, and also how the time of top-down maybe is over, or maybe over in this transition, and the dialogue is the key to actually make a just and equal transition. We have time for one more best practice, or maybe two more. Yes.
It's not going to be long. Mahdi from Somalia. And I think I want to thank the speakers and talk about. And all of them, you talk about something that are relevant to the Somali situation. As my friend alluded to, we understand a couple of things now. For you as youth, we understand no one should be left behind in this transition. And this transition is very difficult. It's a change. And change always has resistance. And we have to work on that. One of the things we have done this year is to involve youth in this transition. And we had the first national conference on youth of climate change, so that we need to involve youth and use them. As my friend alluded to, we want the government, the companies, and civil societies, all of them to be involved, so that we move from where we are to get to where we want to be in the next couple of years. We have changed our NDC. We have a new NDC. We have a new NAB, National Action Plan. We have that. And we have developed new policies. Because as the previous speakers talk about, policies are important. So that, and then implementation of the policies becomes another thing. So that's the journey we are going to. So we thank you very much for you as youth, involved in this process. And hope our youth and your youth will get joined, because this is not only for Somalia, Africa, and Asia. It's for all of us. So we get involved with that, and thank you very much for that.
I see one last hand. If you can wrap it up and leave us with one last practice, then we'll give the last words to the speakers for any last takeaways. Thank you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Anwar from Bangladesh, work in Islamically Bangladesh. We are focusing on the youth generation. We organized 400 youths under the Youth Net, and we are working for the capacity building in understanding the climate change and the relevant issues. These youths are conducting the courtyard meeting with the community peoples, and they are making awareness among the community people. We are working to identify the capacity building of the community people, to identify their adaptation need and prioritize their adaptation. And then how to access the adaptation finance. So it is important that the people of this country, of Bangladesh, requires huge amount of adaptation fund. And another side, it should be goes to the people directly and the easy way, so that our resources limited, but when it goes to the ground, goes to the end people, they get a smaller amount, crossing the different tiers. So people need the adaptation fund directly. And so that locally lead adaptation we are focusing. People, they can identify their adaptation need and they can do accordingly. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I think this comment really highlights how Just Transitions is about everything. You know, we have a Just Transitions negotiation track, but so far we've been talking about adaptation, we've been talking about finance, we've been talking about climate education. And I really hope that everyone, maybe my takeaway at least from this, is that Just Transitions are intertwined with every other topic that we're talking about here in Baku. And I hope we continue that discussion.
Yeah, and also we have had so many best practices from so many different contexts, but we also see that some elements of the Just Transitions are just so the same. So please keep sharing your best practices. And we forgot to mention that first, but we are going to make a list of deliverables. And if you want to get those, please come to us after the event and give us your email address, and then we will send it to you, and then we can keep in contact. But maybe we want to ask Arnoud to the floor now to share your takeaways from this event and maybe closing.
This is working, yeah. Okay, I'm growing old, so it's better that the youth takes over. So really, thank you for doing this and speaking out and organizing this plenary session. So many good practices we have heard. Maria, with all the difficulties in your country, with your conflict, and trying to reach out to the local population, how difficult that is. With Albert, with the plan, getting the stakeholders together, make a plan, otherwise you're not becoming Benjamin Franklin, which is a great example. But it's really good to hear how you take whole society with you. And what Rest has told us about what's in South Africa, listen to the audience, listen to your public and work with them together. That's really, for me, a big takeaway. In the Netherlands, we've got this luxury position that when we talk about jobs, we've got more jobs available than we've got people. So that whole discussion is quite not an actual discussion, but it might be. So it is very interesting to listen, and we have to take that into consideration, that it is about the jobs. When you want to make a successful transition, you need the people. It is the people who are going to make it. So listen to them and do it with them together. I think we all agree on that, and I can just underline what you are saying. Keep on sharing best practices. We all have to we're in this together. And there's no good, there's no right. We face our own problems, but we have to continue. And then in the end, together with society, I'm sure we'll make it, and I'm sure everybody makes it. So really, thank you all for participating into this side event. Spread the world, go on, and we will never stop, and we will make it. Thank you. And please, can you leave your email address and we will send you the deliverables.